Retired Air Force General John Teichert joins me now to talk about the national security implications of the latest deal, the budget deal in Washington, China, and the CCP. General, great to have you on the show.
David, it's great to be here. Thank you.
I mentioned the dime strategy, General. I know that certainly you do, as a general, understand this. It's part of what is taught to senior leadership, but across all areas of the military, it should be taught even more so, in my opinion. The economic, the budget deal, China, the CCP. Your assessment, sir.
David, so you are absolutely right that we should think about our instruments of power along the dime construct, and each of those elements requires us to have a functioning government. And I think this debt limit deal is just an example of a continuing pattern of chronic dysfunction that continues to erode our military readiness and harms our military members and their families. And really, I think the biggest element of that is the fact that for 12 of the last 13 years, we have started the fiscal year without a budget, without a military budget. And that means that we've limped along with continuing resolutions and government shutdowns. And every time we do that, it erodes our national security and it hinders our global credibility.
Let's take a look from the China, as in CCP, side of the equation, the Chinese Communist Party. Second largest holder of our debt. It's an interdependent situation, but it's also a weapon of sorts. How would you assess China's use of economic power against the United States?
David, I think there's a lot of elements of that, and you are right that all of the functioning of our military requires resources, and those resources are tied to money and budget. And when we think about this strategic adversary in China having the levers of power that it can play as it desires by using or deciding to dump the debt that has purchased, it creates something that should be considered untenable for us. And ultimately, we've got to find ways, one, to curb our overall spending, and two, to make sure that those that we rely upon as a part of the E and dime are those that we can trust.
The budget deal, as you see it, yes, military funding a part of it, but are there other areas of concern with what was just done in Washington, D.C. and the potential effects on our economic stability going forward? And I like to look beyond just an election cycle. While the politicians make decisions and our elected representatives vote on these policies, we have to look longer than an election cycle.
We do, David, and I think that we've got to understand that the more and more we decide to spend and get into debt, the less likely it is that generations down the road are going to be able to afford the type of national security apparatus that we enjoy today. We need to find a way towards something that is sustainable and that we don't burden the future to spend in the present. And right now, I don't think that we should expect to be able to continue to have a strong military in the future, generations down the road, if we don't do something about our spending today.
While we're talking about the U.S., my guest, General John Teichert, retired Air Force General, while we're talking about the U.S., I look around this as a global effect. During the Trump years, there was a demand, for example, for NATO payments by those countries, their respective percentages of GDP, pay their fair share, to use the term. There are also other nations that interact with China. We have, of course, our North American nations, Canada, U.S., and Mexico, and others, Mercosur in Latin America, although that's in trouble. But India, that's another big player with a border and active conflict with China at times. But should we be looking at this as U.S. versus China, or U.S. and a combined series of actions and, in fact, reactions or retractions from China?
David, absolutely. There is a unique American advantage that we enjoy with this broad and trusting network of allies and partners that encircle the globe. And when I say unique, it means that we have it and no one else does, and China would love to, but they do not. And so as we look at the challenge in deterring China primarily, we've got to consider all of these allies and partners and hoping and encouraging them to pay their fair share and carry their weight. And as we look even at an ally like Japan, they have committed just recently for the next 5 years to double their defense spending. We see the same things going on in South Korea and Australia and in Europe. And that is encouraging to me that these countries realize that it is a dangerous world and that we together are the only ones that can ultimately deter and defeat if necessary.